I never imagined a solo road trip could turn into a nightmare. It was late at night, and I was driving through the desolate highways of the Midwest. I had been on the road for hours, and fatigue was setting in. I decided to pull over at a rest stop to stretch my legs and use the facilities. The rest stop was eerily empty, with only a few flickering streetlights illuminating the area. I headed to the restroom, feeling the weight of the long drive. After a few minutes, I washed my hands and returned to my car, only to find a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. It was a note in shaky handwriting saying, "Help me." A sense of unease crept over me as I looked around, but the rest stop was deserted. I decided to call the police, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. They assured me they'd send someone to check it out, but advised me to leave immediately. As I drove away, my heart raced. The feeling of being watched was palpable. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, and a distorted voice whispered. I nearly swerved off the road in shock. The voice continued.
"You can't escape."
Panic set in as I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a shadowy figure sitting in the back seat. I slammed on the brakes, but when I turned around, the back seat was empty. My mind was racing, and I struggled to catch my breath. Determined to reach the next town, I sped down the highway, but the car began to sputter and slowed to a stop. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service and the rest stop miles behind me. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, when I heard faint whispers coming from the darkness outside. The whispers grew louder, and I saw shadowy figures emerging from the woods, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Terrified, I locked the doors and prayed for daylight. The figures circled the car, their whispers turning into shrill cries. I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. Hours felt like an eternity until the first light of dawn broke the darkness. The figures vanished, and the car started without issue. I drove to the nearest town and reported the incident, but no one believed me. They chalked it up to exhaustion and stress. But I know what I saw, and the memory haunts me to this day. Some horrors are never meant to be uncovered.
It was a night much like any other when I found myself driving back to the farm late alone on the winding road. There were no stars or moon out, and everything behind me was pitch black. My headlights seemed weak, barely piercing the thick blackness ahead, but I kept driving, determined to get home. As I navigated the lonely road, something caught my eye. For a fleeting moment, I saw a woman in a white dress with long black hair walking on the opposite side. I blinked and looked again, but she had vanished. I dismissed it as my mind playing tricks on me and continued driving, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in. A few minutes later, I felt a strange chill in the air. Suddenly, I noticed a pair of eyes staring at me from the rearview mirror. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized it looked like the same woman. Her eyes locked onto mine. I quickly glanced over my shoulder, but the back seat was empty. Panic set in as I faced forward, my knuckles squeezing the steering wheel. I pressed harder on the gas, speeding down the deserted highway. Every now and then, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the mirror. Her eyes were still there, unblinking and intense. I muttered a prayer under my breath, trying to calm my nerves, but the sensation of her getting closer was overwhelming. Just when I thought she would reach out and grab me, I drove across a bridge. The air seemed to lighten, and when I dared to look in the rearview mirror again, she was gone. Relief washed over me, but I knew I had encountered something otherworldly. From that night on, I made a vow to avoid driving that stretch of road after dark. The memory of those eyes staring at me from the rearview mirror remains etched in my mind, a haunting reminder of that terrifying encounter.
The open road had always been my escape. There's something about driving alone, the hum of the engine, and the endless stretch of highway that clears my mind. This trip was no different, or so I thought. Little did I know it would turn into a nightmare I'd never forget. I was driving through the back roads of the Pacific Northwest, the dense forest closing in on either side of the narrow, winding road. The sun had long since set, and a thick fog had begun to roll in, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. My headlights barely pierced the dense mist, creating an eerie glow. As I rounded a particularly sharp bend, I saw her, a woman in a flowing white dress. Standing on the side of the road, her long black hair obscured her face, and she seemed to be swaying gently. Instinctively, I slowed down, my heart pounding. I couldn't just leave her there. I rolled down the window. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" I called out. She didn't respond, just continued to sway. I felt a chill run down my spine but decided to pull over and check. As soon as I opened the door, a bone-chilling shriek filled the air. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, filled with pure terror and anguish. I was terrified, my blood running cold. The woman in white turned her head slowly towards me, revealing hollow, black eyes that seemed to pierce through me. Her mouth was open, but the shriek didn't match her movements, as if it was coming from somewhere else entirely. Terrified, I jumped back into the car and slammed the door shut. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, desperate to start the engine. The shrieking grew louder, more intense, filling the car with its deafening sound. Finally, the engine roared to life, and I sped off, my heart racing. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see her standing there, but she was gone. The shrieking stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I drove as fast as I could, the fog seeming to close in even more tightly around me. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the faint lights of a small diner up ahead. I pulled into the parking lot, shaking and breathless. I stumbled inside, where a few patrons looked up in surprise. The waitress approached me, concern etched on her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. I nodded, struggling to find the words. There was a woman, in white, on the road. She was shrieking. The waitress's face paled, and the other patrons exchanged uneasy glances. "You saw the shrieking lady in white," she said quietly. "Legend has it, she was a bride who died in a car accident on that road decades ago. They say she appears to lone travelers, her shriek a warning of impending doom." I shuddered, the memory of those hollow eyes and that haunting shriek still fresh in my mind. Why does she scream?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They say she's trapped, reliving her final moments over and over," the waitress replied, "and anyone who hears her shriek is marked." "Marked for what?" I whispered. "For misfortune?" she said, her eyes filled with pity. "Terrible things happen to those who encounter her." I left the diner as soon as dawn broke, the fear still gripping me. For the rest of my trip, I avoided that road, taking the long way around, but the memory of the shrieking lady in white stayed with me, a chilling reminder of that night. If you ever find yourself driving alone on a foggy, deserted road and see a woman in white, turn around. Some spirits are best left undisturbed, and some warnings should never be ignored.
If you crave tales that send shivers down your spine, if you seek the thrill of the unknown, and if you're ready to explore the shadows lurking in the night, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of thrill seekers. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update when we uncover new mysteries and share the most terrifying stories from around the world. Remember, every click brings you closer to the darkness, and you don't want to be left alone in the dark, do you?